Silence folded around the comet before light arrived. A sensor blinked once. Timestamp: February 9, 2025. At the edge of the solar system's quiet zone, the Comet Interceptor turned its lens toward 3IATLAS. The object drifted in near Stillness, its core dim, its halo faint as thought. Nothing moved. Not yet. Then, under ultraviolet trace, motion began. Faint ions slipped from shadow, thin threads uncoiling from a surface colder than nitrogen frost. The European Space Agency's imaging suite captured the first jet, narrow as a whisper. Particles left the nucleus at 200 meters per second, shimmering like dust made of breath. From millions of kilometers away, data streamed toward Earth. Each pulse of light carried fragments of silence, broken only by motion too small to hear. At mission control, the telemetry painted a slow eruption, a rhythm unfolding where stillness once reigned. The comet had crossed between invisibility and expression. For months, 3IATLAS had been a ghost, an interstellar traveler without activity. Now, its shell cracked, its body venting ions like sighs beneath frozen sunlight. The Comet Interceptor rotated, adjusting its cameras for the shift in brightness. Solar panels angled, correcting attitude by fractions. No sound, no friction, only precision. The detectors counted photons, each one a sign that the void was not empty. The first image showed a pale arc, jets curving like strings of light. Within that frame, the comet was both still and alive. Every second stretched, drawn thin by distance. Time itself seemed to hesitate. History returned. Once, Hubble had seen the same behavior in faraway comets, but never from an object that came between stars. This was the first of its kind, a silence older than the sun, breaking at last. The European Space Agency marked the reading. The numbers stabilized. For a few minutes, light bloomed where none had been. Stillness opened its eyes. Inside the spacecraft, the ion detectors awakened. Every chamber hissed with electricity, thin fields catching what could not be seen. Data built itself from silence, each particle counted, each angle mapped. The Comet Interceptor aligned its triaxial gyros. Microthrusters fired in pairs, adjusting orientation by micrometers per second. The imaging core cooled to 200 degrees Kelvin, balancing clarity against frost. Nothing moved that was not intended. On the screen, the ion jets of 3IATLAS shimmered in spectral blue. Each stream measured no more than 20 meters across, but stretched kilometers into vacuum. Charged particles twisted along magnetic lines, curling in graceful spirals. The comet's silence had structure, and its structure had motion. Telemetry pulsed through the deep space network, translating distance into rhythm. The numbers climbed, then steadied. A thin arc of plasma spread behind the nucleus, a trail of energy folding into light. The sensors counted ions per cubic centimeter, each one leaving the core at 200 meters per second, each one marked by a flicker of ultraviolet. Onboard processors compared ratios of sodium and carbon. Software removed noise, interpolated the vacuum, corrected drift. Every fraction of data ran through the machine's artificial memory. Pattern over pattern, orbit over orbit, from command link to transmission beam. Light became number. Number became motion. Motion became image. The interceptor rotated again, mirrors aligning like muscles beneath metal skin. At 45 degrees, sunlight reflected across the lens, filling the camera with a ghost of brightness. For a moment, the system nearly overflowed. Pulse surge. The sudden increase in ion density saturated the detectors. Graphs peaked, colors inverted. Instruments hissed with energy. Within 12 seconds, the surge resolved, the comet venting a pulse of plasma that thinned into nothing. The European Space Agency confirmed the readings. It was real. The mechanical silence after the event felt deeper. Cooling fans slowed. Telemetry stabilized. Through the antenna, Faint radio hiss returned to level 0. The spacecraft's heartbeat evened out. In the archive, the pulse surge marked its line, time-stamped and cross-checked with solar flux and magnetic drift. Each spike spoke of hidden pressure beneath the comet's calm skin. Something moved inside Stillness, and for the first time, Stillness replied. The spacecraft continued its path, calculating the next interception angle. Between signals, the machine rested in the hum of its own circuitry. Power stable, orbit steady, light constant. Far from Earth, silence became an instrument, and motion became its voice. On Earth, morning light touched the antennas at Sombrero Station. The signal had traveled across millions of kilometers, silent but exact. A line of data drew itself across a monitor, pale as frost. Engineers leaned closer, each breath fogging the reflection on the screen. For months, they had expected nothing. 3IATLAS had seemed inert, an object passing through stillness. Now, the charts pulsed with certainty, not loud but alive. One scientist whispered, "The comet has started breathing." No one laughed. They only watched the numbers shift like tide against glass. Far beyond, the comet turned slowly under distant sunlight. Every jet that escaped its surface carried dust older than the solar system itself. Atoms that had never known warmth were now drawn into motion. It was as if time had thawed for one brief moment. A technician ran her hand along the console. The metal was cold, yet steady. She thought of wind moving through canyons on Earth, the same invisible motion shaping silence into pattern. A mug of coffee sat untouched, steam fading, a pencil rolled to the floor and no one noticed. Someone murmured, "It is like the comet exhaled after centuries." Another voice replied, and the void answered back. Outside the control center, clouds hung over the hills. The same light that struck the comet now spread across wet concrete. In the air, one could almost smell dust, not of Earth, but of something older, colder, more patient. Every dataset came with its own heartbeat. Each spike, a moment of release. Each silence, a rest note in the long score of motion. The team compared the curve of ion intensity to Earth's auroras. Both formed when charged particles met resistance. Both painted the invisible with light. Nature repeated its syntax across distance. If the comet's jet was a breath, then the sun was a pulse, and the void between them a long inhale. A senior scientist closed his eyes for a moment. He had worked through decades of data, seen noise turn into evidence. Yet this felt different. The silence carried meaning. It was as though the act of looking had become participation. The ion jet shimmered on their screens, light scattered into geometry. Beyond numbers, it resembled art, motion suspended between intention and chance. Somewhere in a notebook, someone wrote 3 words, "Stillness makes motion." It would become a mission note, then a thesis title, then maybe a quiet philosophy. On Earth, evening replaced morning. The data feed looped again. Comet Interceptor continued its path, gathering fragments of the comet's breath, each orbit slower, more deliberate. The human story was never far from the machine. Every instrument carried a trace of its maker's patience. Every beam of light was filtered through curiosity. To measure was to believe in continuity. In the control room, the lights dimmed for calibration. Screens glowed like distant moons. For a moment, everyone stopped talking. They simply listened to the hum of servers, and in that hum, found the same rhythm as the jets of 3IATLAS. The room was silent, yet the silence had texture, the sound of electrons, the slow beat of expectation, the weight of distance folded into trust us. Outside, stars returned. Each one a memory of light breaking from stillness. Each one a reminder that silence is not absence, but readiness. The paradox revealed itself in one line of light, motion inside silence, energy born of stillness, jets bursting from a core that had slept for eons. The comet spoke without sound, its voice a thread of ions against darkness. Silence was not absence. It was pressure waiting to release. The Comet Interceptor had not awakened the comet. It had only listened long enough to hear what was always there. Stillness was the mask of movement. The void was not empty. It was full of waiting. Every photon that struck the lens carried that truth. The frozen core held more potential than chaos itself. Order was not silence. It was preparation. Light emerges only where stillness endures, a boundary between what moves and what remembers. Between silence and motion, the comet existed. Between observation and meaning, the watchers followed. What they found was not activity, but patience. And patience is the language of time itself. Light carries memory even when the source is gone. The images of 3IATLAS lingered long after the comet moved out of frame. The Comet Interceptor replayed them again and again, each pixel a fragment of motion held inside stillness. For 10 days, the ion jets repeated their rhythm. Each dawn of the comet's slow rotation, a faint exhalation, a plume, a pause, then darkness again. The pattern was delicate yet faithful. This was the dataset echo. 2 systems, camera and spectrometer, speaking in agreement, one recorded light, one recorded charge. Both told the same story. Stillness releasing motion, then returning to rest. To human eyes, it looked like breathing. To instruments, it looked like order. To understanding, it looked like something in between. The numbers were small, the brightness less than 1% of what the sun gave back. Yet meaning does not measure in magnitude. It measures in coherence. A scientist in Darmstadt watched the jet profile fade from his monitor. Outside his window, a fog of city light shimmered against low clouds. He noticed how both scenes, the comet's jet and the Earth's haze, were born from resistance. Particles escaping confinement, light finding its path through stillness. He breathed out slowly, and in that breath mirrored the comet's exhale. The revelation was not mechanical. It was recognition that everything moving through silence leaves a trace of connection. That data is not distance, but continuity. Each ion left the comet at hundreds of meters per second. Each photon left its path at the speed of all knowledge. And yet, at the far end of transmission, humans waited, not to command, but to listen. Listening became discovery. Silence became presence. Light became the memory of waiting fulfilled. The more the scientists observed, the clearer the pattern grew, not of chaos, but of rhythm, a pulse between stillness and release, a slow conversation across millions of kilometers. No one called it life, yet something alive passed between the observer and the observed, a symmetry that asked to be understood, not explained. The revelation deepened in quiet awareness. The comet's jets faded, but the image remained, like an afterglow behind thought. Every discovery ends where attention begins. 3IATLAS had not changed the nature of space. It had changed the way stillness was seen. Light broke from silence, and silence, for a moment, became comprehension. Light drifts without origin. The comet fades beyond the lens. Numbers fall away, leaving shimmer. What was motion becomes hue. What was silence becomes texture. The jets no longer glow in data or color. They dissolve into a pale memory suspended in vacuum. The surface of 3IATLAS cools, its breath spent, its rhythm gone. Stillness folds over motion, soft as dust settling into shadow. Nothing remains but the curve of light crossing nowhere. In the archive, the final image stabilizes, pixels blurring until they resemble frost seen through glass. Meaning dissolves, only perception stays. The spacecraft turns, panels facing away from the sun, mirrors dimming, power resting in reserve. No signal sent, No instruction given, just drift. Inside that drift, every motion becomes awareness. Each flicker of reflection turns to memory. Every fragment of light carries its own silence. The comet is no longer comet. It is stillness remembered as motion. It is silence that once spoke. In the dark between orbits, the interceptor slows, listening to the absence it has created. Silence becomes complete again. The sky around 3IATLAS is empty again. The last ion trails have vanished, leaving a silence so complete it feels luminous. The Comet Interceptor drifts in the wake of what was seen. No signal, no flare, only the slow hum of systems idling. Power steady, orbit quiet. Light falls through nothing and still finds direction. On Earth, night carries the same stillness. The data has been stored, labeled, archived. Screens glow faintly in dark rooms. The scientists have gone home. Only the servers whisper. Across the void, nothing changes. And yet, everything has been altered by attention. Stillness observed is never the same stillness again. Inside the spacecraft, thermal currents fade. The lens cools, its glass holding the ghost of what it saw. Somewhere within the core memory, a file remains open, not as data, but as pause. Precision rose, certainty fell. The silence of the comet is now shared. The machines have heard it, and so have we. Light breaking from stillness, stillness returning to light. The comet continues its path, slow, deliberate, ancient. The orbit will carry it past the sun, and then into the long dark again. No sound, no color, only motion too patient to see. The frost remembers the warmth it once released. So does the mind that measured it. There is rest in the pause between signals. There is room for breath beneath quiet sky, and balance remained.